much. Thank you, Ari. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in here. I cannot see any of you, and I'm afraid to move my screen at all because I might lose you. So I'm just going to assume you're out there. And when this is over and I can feel a little more comfortable on my screen, maybe I'll pull up your pictures and be able to say hi. So for now, I'm just going on faith. And we're going to talk a little bit for the next half hour about Leonard Nimoy, his childhood. He turns 91 this Saturday, so we are entering his birthday time. And there's no getting around the fact that we do need to mention that he is the son of Ukrainian refugees. If his parents had not been welcomed into this country, look at all the culture we would have lost, all the things. So let's try to keep that in mind as we're talking about Leonard today. And let's keep in mind and our hopes and wishes for all the people in Ukraine that also deserve a chance to live long and prosper, if I may say so. We're going to talk a little bit about Leonard's Judaism, his photography, my connection to him, how we became friends, and how I came to write the book. Fascinating. I usually like to ask how many people knew of Leonard's Judaism and that he was proudly Jewish, but I can't do that because I'm going to ask you to hold your hands up and I won't see you. But let's listen carefully for a moment and start out with Leonard's talking right here.
Sein oder nicht sein, und was ist die Frage? Es ist edle von mir vertrocknet still durch Leiderstehen Pfeil von Beuys und Masel, oder ist es bewaffnet an Gegenjagd von Leid und endigen Kampf?
So I hope you were all able to hear that. Leonard was a native Yiddish speaker, as we will hear a little bit soon. And when he was born in March of 1931, it was into a Yiddish-speaking, kosher, meaning 3 sets of dishes in his case, Orthodox Jewish household on Chambers Street in Boston. His neighborhood, which in the early 1900s had been African-American, was now primarily Italian and Irish, Catholic, with a smattering of Jews and Blacks. Leonard shared this small apartment that you see. That's actually his finger right there pointing. He shared this small apartment with his older brother Mel, his mom and his dad, and his Bubba and Zadie. 3 generations in 4 rooms. The shul was right down the block. And when he brought his dad lunch, and as he did every day, the daily forwards to the family barbershop, he had only 3 blocks to walk. That's his dad cutting hair. You can't really see it in this picture, but if you look very closely, if I have a pointer in the crook of his dad's arm, there's a little picture there of Spock, because people used to come in and ask for a Spock haircut. So while Leonard was growing up, he was occasionally called a Jew bastard. That was not that unusual. And he felt like an outcast on Sundays when all his friends had to church. But in general, he got along with the neighborhood kids. There's Leonard right on the upper right. I don't know which way it's facing in your screen, but you see that smile, and that is Leonard with a bunch of his friends. Leonard was very aware growing up that his life was much easier than that of his parents, Max and Dora, who, as I mentioned, had escaped pogroms. They left Zaslev, Ukraine, his father sneaking across the border, and his mother and grandmother literally smuggled out in a hay cart. So they made that trek and made it to America, where they could join Leonard's adventurous grandfather, who had come years earlier to seek a better life. I think we have in our audience today, maybe Bobby Reno was there, who did a lot of research and helped find some of the original lading, the passengers of his parents. Leonard was quite aware that when his parents entered the United States, they were stamped as aliens. That was, of course, what they were called in order to get in. One Rosh Hashanah, when Leonard was 8 years old, he accompanied his father to shul. And I must say that this was one that was across town, not the one that was right down the block, because his father had an argument with the leaders of that shul. Leonard's one of his favorite jokes. He used to always like to tell about a Jew who was found on a desert island, and he showed his rescuers the two shuls he had built, one to attend and one he wouldn't step in for $1 million. So that was the case basically on Leonard's street. During the service, a bunch of men went to the bima and started chanting and swaying. This is a picture. I'm sorry, I don't have the video of Leonard explaining and showing them. That's Leonard behind that cloak. And cover your eyes, his father whispered. Don't look, no cheating. But Lenny peeked. He was fascinated by what he saw. The men pulled their prayer shawls over their heads, but their chants only got louder. As they blessed the congregation, they raised both arms in the air and held out their hands as if they were shooting a two-handed jump shot. But what were they doing with their fingers? That night in his room, Lenny practiced what he'd witnessed. He taped together his index finger and his middle finger, then his pinky and ring finger. By the time of his bar mitzvah, Lenny could make the gesture easily with either hand. His fingers looked like the letter shin, which he'd learned in Hebrew school was the first letter of the word shalom, or peace, and Shaddai, one of the names for God. So as Leonard grew up, he had a lot of jobs. He sold newspapers on Beacon Hill, for those Bostonians in the audience. And he actually also stacked chairs at the Hatch Shell and would often stay in the back and listen to the Arthur Fiedler concerts at the time. And the reason that he took so many jobs was he needed money because his family had gotten a Kodak bellows camera and he was saving up to buy film. And I am off camera right now, but if you ask me, then a question and answer, or maybe I can hold up, I don't know if you can see, this is his actual camera, which Leonard was nice enough to leave me. So that is sitting on my desk at all times, right next to his watch. It's amazing for me every time I take a look. It reminds me of all our times together. Anyways, Leonard started taking photographs very early in his life. And there he is. Some of the pictures that you're seeing from my book, Fascinating, these are all by Adele Rodriguez, who's the illustrator of that book, who, just as an aside, came here as a refugee from Cuba. And after he was hired for the book, we did not know this before, Knopf reached out to him and asked him if he would do this. We learned that Adele learned to speak English by watching old Star Trek episodes when he finally came here. So again, so many connections all the times. Leonard started taking photographs and he started taking them of his family. He tried to capture all the wit and wisdom in Zadie's face. Click. And for the first time, he noticed the lines around Bubba's eyes. Click. He studied his mother and his father through the viewfinder. He had never looked at them so closely. He could always tell what his mother was thinking, but his father hid his emotions. So this was the first time that Leonard really started looking at people very closely. And of course, these were the skills he later brought to his role as a director in many films. This is a photograph he did early on of his mother and his father. This photograph is called Max and Dora. And Leonard loved this photograph. If any of you come visit us here in Northampton, you can come and happy to show it to you. He said this photograph captured his parents' personalities. His mother was curious about everything. She stopped to look wherever she was. His father just walked straight ahead. Wherever he was going, he was in a hurry. So this really captured their personalities. Lenny knew you needed a dark room without any windows to develop pictures. So he closed the door to the family bathroom and turned out the light. Slowly, he watched each image emerge. Fascinating. It was magic. He was exposing his family's souls. So Leonard's grandfather was basically his hero. His parents were very fearful people. As many people who escape pogroms and hide, and they spent their lives trying to blend in and not make waves. Tomorrow you could die, so be very careful, was their attitude. But others who went through the same circumstances would often take different ways of looking at the world, as his grandfather did. His grandfather used to tell Leonard, tomorrow you could die, so go enjoy yourself. Go, do, explore. This was his, his mantra and his gift to Leonard. This is Leonard's grandmother. She only spoke Yiddish, and she used to sing Leonard her favorite poem by Itzhak Manger, and a wonderful poet, also a Ukrainian poet. And the poem that she would read was called There Is a Tree That Stands. And it's about a boy that wants to turn into a bird and fly away, but it's cold out. And so his mother makes him put on a coat and a galoshes and a hat and gloves, and so much that eventually he cannot fly at all.
Zu viel Sachen, also my ungetundet Vögel und Schwachen. I can't fly. My mother put on too many clothes. She kept swearing that around the mama's organ of the Liebschaft, Mishka lost better than her love prevented me from becoming a bird.
So in 1948, when Leonard was 17, he heard that the settlement house in his neighborhood, where he would often sing and play sports, the settlement house, as many of you know, tried to teach immigrants how to fit into American society. And the settlement house had a great influence on the generation of early immigrants. And the settlement house was putting on a performance of Awake and Sing by the playwright Clifford Odets. Well, Lenny just happened to be a 17-year-old boy, and he was offered the part. It was about 3 generations of a poor Jewish family who lived together in one small apartment. The director needed someone to play the part of the son. The son yearned for a better life in a society where everyone was treated fairly. Lenny read the play. Could the author have known the Nimoys? How did Mr. Odets understand what Lenny was thinking? Thoughts he hadn't shared with anyone. Well, this was Leonard's first acting experience, and he realized what could be brought out in theater, how it could touch people's souls. As it was, a priest from Boston College saw the play, and offered Leonard a summer scholarship in the theater department. By August, Lenny knew he wanted to be a professional actor. His parents had crossed the ocean in pursuit of a better life. Now he would travel across the country to Hollywood to follow his dreams. In September of 1949, he was standing at South Station wearing a blue double-breasted suit from Filene's Basement and holding a train ticket to California. His mother gave him a hug goodbye. There were tears in her eyes. "May you live till 120 and have a long and healthy life like Moses," she told Leonard. "Learn to play the accordion," his father called out as he stepped onto the 20th Century Limited. "Actors starve, but at least musicians can eke out a living." Well, Leonard worked as a movie theater usher, a soda jerk. He worked selling vacuums door to door. He worked as a cab driver. One day, when he was feeling like, well, maybe his father was right and it was time to go home, he picked up a man with a Boston accent. "Never give up as long as you can make a difference in people's lives. Lots of competition in your business, just like in mine. But an actor is like a politician. There is always room at the top for one more good one." He handed Leonard his business card. Congressman John F. Kennedy. So, in July 1953, while I was busy being born, Leonard was acting in a production of Sholem Aleichem's It's Hard to Be a Jew at Hollywood's Civic Theater. Those were his first parts when he got to Hollywood. He was working with the great Yiddish actor and director, Maurice Schwartz. And this is kind of interesting. The reason he got so many roles is because he spoke Yiddish and people thought he didn't look Jewish. So he got all the roles to play the non-Jews in the plays. From there, his career took off a little bit. His first big break was playing Kid Monk Baroni. He got all of $350 for the lead in this play, but it was worth it because it was shown in Boston and his name was up on movie marquees. His next job, of course, was Zombies of the Stratosphere. He worked constantly in Gunsmoke, Twilight Zone, Combat, Bonanza, General Hospital. He was a working actor for 13 years, and he was also teaching acting. Well, 13 years after he got to Hollywood, he got a call from Gene Roddenberry, a producer who wanted him to play the part of an alien science officer named Spock. But Spock would always feel like an outsider because his father was from a planet Vulcan. Leonard wasn't sure he wanted the part. He would have to wear pointy ears and wear a silly haircut. What if his career was ruined? He tried to think of his decision logically. Then he remembered how Zadie encouraged him to take chances. "My folks came to the United States as refugees. They were called aliens and they became citizens," he told Mr. Roddenberry. "I was born in Boston as a citizen. Then I came to Hollywood as an outsider, and now it is time for me to become an alien. I am Spock." Well, in Star Trek's second season, the Enterprise visited the planet Vulcan. It was the first time viewers would see the world Spock came from. The original script told Spock to shake hands with the Vulcan Queen, but Leonard thought he should have a special greeting. "Some Asians bow when they meet," he told the director, "and some military men salute." "Well, how do Vulcans greet each other?" he was asked. Leonard thought for a while. And then he remembered his time in the temple when he was 8 years old. So he held up his hand in the ancient Hebraic gesture, and he blessed the actors he worked with, and he blessed the audience, and he blessed everyone all over the universe. Live long and prosper. What Leonard didn't realize, of course, was that he had practiced that gesture from the time he was 8 years old and could do it quite easily. They had to, on set, of course, call a timeout as the other actors went backstage and had their fingers taped. In any case, this is how my book ends. Fascinating, The Life of Leonard Baskin. But it's not the end of either this lecture or the stories. Star Trek was not a hit, to put it mildly. It lasted 3 seasons, and Leonard was 38. He had 2 kids and a family to support. He had been taking pictures since he was 7 years old, and he continued doing so on movie sets. This is actually a photograph of the old Universal building that he took. Here's another photograph, an early photograph of Leonard's looking out the window at Universal. You can see he was trying to capture, and I'm just seeing this for the first time. It almost looks like somebody's got a mask on there. He would take his camera to movie sets. This is the set in Almeria, Spain, of the movie Catlaw with Yul Brynner. Here's another one of his early photographs. You can see many of these on our site. We'll talk about that later. Leonard at the time seriously entertained switching careers and becoming a professional photographer. He actually went back to UCLA and he studied with the photographer Robert Heineken. This was just as Star Trek reruns were gaining steam. Well, Heineken was a conceptual photographer. He used to say, if you see a man jumping out of a building and you have a camera and you shoot the picture, you are not an artist, unless you are doing a series exploring the subject of people jumping out of buildings. He thought to be an artist, you needed a theme and you needed a concept that you would then transfer into photography. Well, Leonard had been taking photographs. Besides on the set, he was taking photographs of a lot of dancers and doing photographs of a lot of nudes as well while he was acting throughout the time. And he started wondering, well, if he was a real photographer, what was the concept behind the photographs he was taking? It wasn't enough to just take a nice photograph. What was the idea he was trying to explore? Well, by now, he had discovered why, as an 8-year-old child, he was told to cover his eyes. There's a Jewish mystical tradition that teaches that when the Shekinah is invoked to bless the congregation, may God's face shine on you, the beauty and truth of her light is so overwhelming that if you gaze at it directly, you might be blinded. So you cover your eyes. Shekinah. There's a photograph of Leonard's, actually, of his hands. Shekinah, the feminine aspect of God. So all of a sudden he thought, well, this is his concept. He's going to explore the feminine aspect of God. And so he took his nudes and he draped them in talit and he had them wear tefillin. Of course, in the Orthodox tradition, only men are permitted tefillin, etc. So he was challenging orthodoxy. He was celebrating the feminine, the divine beauty, sex, and religion. That is what he was trying to explore. Here are some other photographs from Shekinah. And I'll just show you, actually, this is, there was a dance put on by, at the Leonard Nimoy Theater, actually, much later on by Amy Greenfield, who actually brought the Shekinah photographs to life. If we have time at the end, remind me, I'll tell you a funny story about the actual presentation. But while this is where our stories start to merge. So while Leonard was devoting himself to photography and exploring his Judaism, I was also beginning to explore Judaism. Today, I'm primarily known as the author of Jewish-themed children's books. But in fact, I never stepped foot in a synagogue or religious day school until I started getting offers to speak there. My own home was 100% secular. My mother was an atheist who traveled very far from a distant Orthodox father. For me, there was no shul, no Yiddish, no Hebrew, no Passover, no Hanukkah, no bar mitzvah. But in college, in a Tolstoy class, I met a spiritual Methodist with an interest in, and with an early interest in interfaith understanding, and a hot date, I asked her out. Jennifer's grandparents were farmers on the Canadian-New York border. I was literally the first Jew they ever met. All of a sudden, they started asking me questions. I felt like I was Woody Allen in Annie Hall. But during my children's bar and bat mitzvah, my wife, I will say, decided to convert to Judaism. I'm not going to get into that here. That's her story to tell. But she actually went into labor while in the mikvah. As my kids decided to approach their bar and bat mitzvah, they were asked to research their backgrounds. And they started asking me questions. And I realized I knew literally nothing about where my family had come from, where my grandparents were. Ukraine, didn't know. Russia, didn't know. Poland, didn't know. So I'm a writer. So I started writing a story called Too Young for Yiddish about a boy who knows nothing of his Zadie's history. So many books, had Zadie really read them all, each with its own ideas and mysteries, each with its own secret world. Aaron lifted one book and then another, but he could not read a single word. They were all written in a language he did not understand. In my village, no one spoke English, Zadie told him. The shochet, our kosher butcher, would sing to the chickens in Yiddish, Shalom Aleichem, Heinrich, peace, little chickens. And the chickens would cluck back in Yiddish, Aleichem Shalom, shochet. So I actually live right near the Yiddish Book Center, if people know our area. And Leonard Nimoy happened to be visiting the National Yiddish Book Center. And they asked him if he would record Too Young for Yiddish. In his honor, by the way, we made this special cover. So I was aware of Leonard's Shekinah photographs. I'm an art dealer in real life. That's my job. But we met while he was recording Too Young for Yiddish, and we got along immediately. There were just a lot of connections, which again I can talk about later. Before long, I was representing his photography at my gallery, and we were doing shows. Here's a couple of other photographs of him. I'm going to actually leave this up for a moment. We were doing an exhibit of Shekinah at the gallery. And a woman came up to Leonard and said, how come your vision of God's feminine beauty is exactly what the classic American skinny woman, what American society sets as classic beauty? Why aren't all women beautiful? I'm going to go back here for a second. I jumped myself. Why aren't all women beautiful? Why are you so set in one vision? Do you think God only has one feminine idea of beauty. And Leonard thought about this. And the woman asked if he perhaps wanted to photograph her. And she was an overweight woman. And he started wondering, at first he said no, but then he remembered his grandfather saying, do what scares you. And so he wondered, how could he photograph her without being disrespectful? And he started looking at some of his photographs where he had taken women and photographed them as sculpture, as it were. He had, during an artist in residence appointment at the American Academy of Rome in 2000, he produced a series of photographs based on a Canova sculpture of Paulina Bonaparte Borghese in the Borghese Gallery. And he thought, well, perhaps he could photograph this woman as a sculptural thing. And this was the first photograph he came up with. And when this photograph was shown, along with another, in one of our exhibitions, people were fascinated. In fact, we got more comments about these photographs than all of the other ones. And people wanted to know about the woman. They wanted to know why he photographed her. And Leonard decided that, that his industry, the film industry, was to blame for creating a lot of what we look at as American beauty. And he decided to photograph some great works of art with a different body type. These are pieces from his book, Full Body. Here, you're going to see this is a Helmut Newton, very famous photograph. Here's Leonard's version. Once you see Leonard's version, I tell you, these women look very emaciated. It's hard actually to see. This is his book, Full Body. And Leonard became a hero to many overweight women, and he found himself being a spokesperson for various body types. Here he is in the gallery. We did a show signing books. And one day Leonard came up to me, and he had been reading Greek mythology. And he told me that he read about how humans used to have 2 heads, 4 arms, 4 legs. And we got so powerful that Zeus sent a lightning bolt, split everyone in 2. And this is why humans are basically dissatisfied. We spend our lives searching for a missing part of ourselves. And he said to me, this is a concept I would like to explore. Who are we really? What goes on under the surface? Again, he's speaking here as an actor and a film director as well. How could he bring all these parts together? And he said to me, okay, that's the concept. Figure out how to do it. And I did. We sat and we ended up we turned our gallery into a photo shoot for days, and invited people to come as their other half. Here's Leonard in the gallery with myself and my wife, and a lot of people did come as other halves. This was my rabbi at the time, who came as his other half. He happens to be gay, and talked about how he would wear leather under his vestments when he was giving service, so he would remember who he was. It was quite moving, actually. Leonard filmed everyone, and we have both the photographs and their talk. This is another fellow. This is actually a Marine who came, and his other self had never told anyone before. And Leonard was so kind that this fellow ended up actually transitioning. It became quite an amazing project. Here's Leonard in our gallery in the studio, working on it. And we traveled. There's the actual gallery. Here's opening day for that show. Here's Mass Mocha, where we showed life-size photographs of some of these Secret Selves pieces. And Leonard and I spent years traveling together to his various photography shows. There we are at Mass Smoker. And here we are again with some of the people in the photographs. The upper right-hand side is actually myself and Leonard's actual son, Adam Nimoy, one of the openings. Myself and my wife, a photograph that Leonard took. Again, some other things. And while we traveled, because Leonard and I became great friends, we bonded over the fact that, yes, it is true. We're from the same stock. We look a bit alike. Most people assumed we were father and son, and we had great fun with that. I have to say that one of the greatest experience I had was once when Leonard and I were eating dinner together, and people would always come and stop us and introduce themselves to Leonard, and he was always kind and generous to every single person. How he did it, I have no idea. This one night, somebody came up to our table, walked right past Leonard and said to me, "Are you Rich Michelson, the writer?" How often is that going to happen in life? And I said, "Yes, I am." They said, "We love your books. Our children read your books. They love it." And then they turned to Leonard and said, "Are you his father?" And Leonard said, "Yes." They said, "Oh, you must be so proud of your son." And Leonard said, "He's a good boy." So we had fun. And we spent time, and Leonard would tell me about his life. I would tell him about many of my other books, and he would help me with them. These are some of the other books I wrote. I ran a lot of things by him first. I have another time, if you invite me back, I will talk to you about The Language of Angels and how Leonard had so much to do with writing that book. But it was during these talks when I realized all the time that I was writing all these books about Jewish people, famous people. Why had it never occurred to me that Leonard's life was just as interesting as many of the people are writing about? He was somebody who followed his dreams, but also remembered where he came from, who fought the good fight. The perfect story to inspire the next generation. He was a mensch, if ever there was one. He was proud of his heritage. He was close to his family. He reached for the stars and he caught them. At the time, I had no idea. There is Leonard again at the gallery. At the time, I had no idea that he would pass away 3 months later. I'm thrilled and pleased that I was able. I did not tell Leonard I was writing this book until it was done and I had a publisher. But I gave him the manuscript while he was 3 months before he died. And he read it. He wrote me, emailed me right back. He said, "It's wonderful. I'm flattered. It's an amazing piece of work. I love that you decided to do it." Then 10 minutes later, he sent me back with some corrections, some changes, et cetera, et cetera. Great. I loved every piece of it. My last words to Leonard was when he was in the hospital. The book had not yet been published, but it was out, and we had a book tour planned together. And I said to Leonard via the phone, "Leonard, you had better get better, because we have a book tour coming up." And his very last words to me were, "Don't worry, Rich, I promise I will be with you." And I took this book on the road, and I can tell you that wherever I went, Leonard was with me. He's with me today. He's with me and with you as well. And I wish you all to live long and prosper. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Will you unshare the screen and we'll take questions real quick?
Stop share. And I will get.
Okay. So do you see that people are still here?
People here? Okay. Nobody leave?
No, they're all here hanging out
folks.
with you. So I wonder who besides Jeff Kaufman has been to your galleries. Chat me something real quick so I know.
I see Bonnie Moss there. She's been to the gallery and also was at the Mass Smoker show. Let's see.
Well, There's like 182 people here, so
Yes,
I'm
Bobby
sure.
Reno, she's been to
Yeah.
the gallery many times. Who else? I see some of my relatives. Hi, Janet.
Oh, good. That's always nice.
I
So you what
see,
you
I see.
sandbag the audience with relatives. You were worried, huh? There's a
Well,
lot of people.
I just in case I wanted somebody to start the standing ovation.
Right.
Oh, there's Edie. Hi, Edie.
I think there's some sitting ovation. They don't stand. It's
Yeah, okay.
tons of. So here's some questions for you. Let's jump in. One thing you didn't really talk about was Leonard Nimoy and his Judaism, like per se. So was Leonard Nimoy, like, was he involved in a synagogue, and what was his Jewish life like as you knew
So,
him?
yeah, so Leonard did belong to a synagogue. Susan Nimoy's, uh, I forget the relatives, and his name just went out of me. Maybe one of you people might remember more than me, but they belonged to a synagogue in Los Angeles, and one of the the rabbi who gave the talk at his memorial service, Rabbi Roskov, is that it? At the LA synagogue, was a relative of his wife, Susan. Leonard was a spiritual man and a believer. We often had that debate. He did not have his family's orthodoxy. He did not take Saturdays off. He did not keep kosher, but he was proudly Jewish, and he touted a lot of Jewish causes. He loved talking about his Judaism, and he did a lot to teach me about Judaism, because I did not grow up in a family with the same things. Oh, I can see myself on screen now. Here's my Leonard Nimoy t-shirt. Okay. I don't want you to think I'm just wearing a t-shirt to come in front of you all. I would have dressed up a lot nicer, but the Leonard Nimoy t-shirt's okay. When I was writing my book, A is for Abraham, which is used in a lot of day schools, and it's basically an alphabet book teaching that, it's kind of odd for somebody who didn't grow up Jewish with an education, a Jewish education, to have a book that's being used to teach the next generation of Jewish children. But when I was first asked to do that book, I first turned it down because I did not feel I was qualified to do so. And I was talking with Leonard, and he was the one who convinced me that, in fact, I should do it. He said, it's hard to ask a fish to describe the water. But he said, you're actually the perfect person to do a book for Jewish children, because your questions are going to be the same questions that Jewish kids will want to know. He said, so think about what you've been asking me about Judaism over the years, the questions that you've been asking yourself, that I asked the rabbis when my wife was converting. He said, because you're starting from square one. And again, he said to me, as his grandfather said to him, do what scares you. So I did that book. I will tell you as an aside, each letter has a little poem with an aside that goes into depth. And when I passed it into my editor, there was only one poem that they did not accept. And it was V is for Vulcan. And I forget the little rhyme now, but V is for Vulcan, Star Trekkers, I'm guessing. No, Spock's greeting comes from a Hebraic blessing, something like that. I don't know. It's scanned better than that, I can base you. But my editor said, well, I think that young kids won't know who Leonard Nimoy is, and they made me take that out. And it was the only thing that was taken out. However, when it came time to publicize the book, they did ask me if my good friend Leonard would help publicize the book. I said, no, sorry. But that does give me a nice story. When I I'm talking about that book in various synagogues and various places, I always use now that story of that being taken out of the book, and it leads into a great conversation with kids who all know Star Trek and Spock. Boy,
Before we jump into Star Trek and Spock, Barbara Hoff says the synagogue was Temple Israel of Hollywood with Rabbi John Rosov.
Yes.
And and then Joanne Lester says she remembers him reading the Book of Jonah with Susan during holiday services. So they were involved in that respect in that synagogue, if you know the synagogue in LA. Obviously, his role as Spock is what most people know him as. And so a few questions with that. Did he talk about regretting that? Because that is really what he's done. You've shown his work in photography, and he was also as a director, an actor, but most people are going to just know him as Spock. Was that something that bothered him, or is he okay with it?
Okay, so there's a misconception here. Because he wrote 2 biographies. The first one was called I Am Not Spock, and the second one was called I Am Spock. And because he was actually told by his publishers that they did not want to use the first title, I Am Not Spock, because it would be misinterpreted. If you actually read the book, he was not disparaging that character at all. Leonard loved Spock. He certainly, it was near and dear to him. And he went on to play many other characters, but he was quite aware that Spock gave him open doors and gave him opportunities that he otherwise would not have had. And he loved the character, and he continued, of course, to return to it throughout his life. He loved when people greeted him in the street with "Live Long and Prosper," as they did literally as soon as that show went on the air. He walked out down the street, and people that took on immediacy. And he was proud of Spock. He was proud of the work because he titled the first biography, I'm Not Spock, which came across from an event when, people would stop him in the street and tell their children, oh, look, that's Spock, that's Spock. And of course, the kids would look at him blankly because he was not Spock. He wasn't Spock until he went into character and put on the costumes and made it happen. So, it started a rumor that he was unhappy with that. He was not at all unhappy with the portrayal, with having that throughout his life and opening so many doors. Of course, he played a lot of important characters. In Golda, he played Golda's husband. He played Mel Mermelstein in y'all. Names go out of my head, in a very important Holocaust movie. And yet he returned to Spock when he was asked, and when he felt the script was good enough that it honored the character.
Gail says it's interesting. Most people, I assume, know that William Shatner is Jewish. He's still around. I think he went up to space recently, and he came back. He did Leonard Nimoy ever talk about his relationship with William Shatner and being Jewish? Kind of, did they have like some kind of secret Jewish, interactions when they were doing their show, or is that something he didn't really mention to you?
Well, I mean, certainly Leonard was more Jewish than Shatner, as far as his wearing things on his sleeve per se. But yeah, it created a brothership between them on the set. They talked about it. I mean, they were born very close to each other. They were same age, same generation. They had a lot in common. Certainly they also fought like crazy, like brothers. They both bonded and went through periods of of brotherly disaffection and affection, as any long relationship goes through. You know, it was a complicated relationship. It was a loving relationship, and I think they had a lot in common, and a lot. You know, basically, it was a long-term, and I think both of them were proud that they were able, as two Jews, to bring their characters front and center. Neither of them shied away from it.
Very cool. And still cool, because I showed my daughters the series, and I will raise my sons on Star Trek as well, just so that they know. Bonnie Kane, other people have asked, how do they get copies? How do they get the t-shirt that you're wearing? How do they get signed copies of your book?
So if you go to my site, richardmichelson.com, you can see my name spelled on my link. There is a link where you can buy signed copies by me. Sorry, not by Leonard, he was gone. But you can buy signed copies of the book, and I'm happy to dedicate it to anyone you want to give it to. I don't sell the t-shirts, sorry. We also have some photography books of Leonard's on rmichelson.com. That's rmichelson.com. Leonard Nimoy. You can see his photography. Please visit, look through his different photographs. They're wonderful. He was an amazing photographer. You know, my biggest problem as his agent, as a photographer, was because he was so well known as a actor, to get people to realize how serious he was as a photographer. For most of his life, he considered himself a photographer first, and the acting was his side job. He never put down the camera. He was always thinking about photography. He was well-versed. He knew the photographers in the past. He really talked about it, and it was something he loved. We spent a lot of time. You know, people, when they ask me about Star Trek, I have to say that that was probably the one thing we never spoke about. We spoke about books. We spoke about art. It was great because I have to say that I was able to get into some wonderful museum shows at major museums, because they would let Leonard in early, and then he would invite me. So, you know, we were all around the country. We would get special tours from the heads of major museums before shows were open to the public. That's what we talked about. We talked about what we were reading, various books that we would trade back and forth. We talked about poetry, and we talked about politics and things like that. We never spoke about Star Trek. He had enough of that elsewhere. That was not generally the conversation.
Just a few minutes left. I want to talk about your career and who you are. So what we see behind you, I think, is just your background, but that is actually what your gallery looks like. So,
yes,
Jeff,
I'm actually in my gallery, and if I were to turn the other way, this is the scene you would actually see. But I have a screen instead of the actual gallery, because I have the door closed, and if it were the actual gallery, you'd all be distracted because people would be walking in and out, etc.
And so we can see in the picture of a Dr. Seuss area and so on. So as I mentioned, you represent like art from Dr. Seuss and Sendak and Mo Willems and Leonard Nimoy. So people come to the store. Are you like there? Do people come and ask you for, I mean, do people find their stuff? Are you an active, like, helping people choose their art? If Jeff Kaufman comes in there, are you like meeting Jeff at the door and showing him stuff? Or are you more behind the scenes there?
I am. Well, you know, I've been doing this for over 40 years. At this point, certainly my staff would take most people around, but if Jeff shows up, I will be here.
Okay.
And take him around personally. I believe I have in the past. And yeah, if you're coming, if you're in Northampton, email me. My email's on my website. Tell me you're going to be here. Come in. I'd be happy to show you around the gallery, sign a book, chat with you. And it's my pleasure. I do still come in to meet clients most days.
So, and if you wear a CSP hat, you get 10% off. So it's awesome.
If you wear a CSP hat, we will not give you 10% off, but we will donate 10% of whatever you buy to CSP.
So what's the most expensive thing there that Jeff could buy?
Well, let's see. I'm trying to remember what artist Jeff likes. But we could.
I don't care what it is. What's the most expensive item you sell?
Oh, geez, what do I have in the gallery at the moment? The most expensive piece is probably in the $500,000 to $600,000 range.
Jeff will take it. So that's how much? That's 10%, 50,000. Okay, fine.
Yeah,
whatever it is, ship it to the Kaufman Craft House. Okay.
It's on. My staff is listening in, and it's already on its way.
Just box it up.
Okay. To change his mind.
You can drive up today to pick it up. Actually, he's in. Your art. Are you? What are you? Are you an? Well, first of all, I know 5 of your titles are PJ Library selections, which is really close to my heart because I probably have all your books.
PJ Library, and you have grandkids or kids. Please sign up for PJ Library. They send you free books. What's wrong with that? Right?
Yeah, no, I think I have all your books in my house, and I didn't even know. So I'm going to ship them to you to sign. I'll bring them. When I come to Boston, I'm going to drive up there to meet you. I'm coming. I'm going to come this summer. So I'll come up. I'll meet you. We'll sign the books. But
I don't draw, if that's your question. I also write for adults. I'm a poet.
Right. And you have don't you have a show off Broadway or something? Are you writing something?
I do have a show that will be opening off Broadway next year. So I'll join my mailing list, and I will send you information on that. And I have also next year, I have my next full-length adult collection coming out called Sleeping as Fast as I Can. And I continue to write children's books. I've got a book on Sidney Taylor coming out, All of a Kind Family, for those who don't know the name but love the book. I've got a biography of Sidney Taylor coming out. I've got a book coming out on Louis Brandeis, the first Jewish justice of the Supreme Court. Lord knows we could use him today. Oh boy, we could use some of his judgments. We could use him just in our day-to-day. Well, don't get me started. We'll be here for another year.
And how did you get all those photos that you showed us at the beginning of Leonard Nimoy growing up?
Photos of Leonard Nimoy growing up from Leonard's photo album.
Okay. Oh, that's a good place to get them.
It was, I was fortunate. I'm one of the fortunate people who, when I go out to LA, I have to tell you, Leonard had no airs about him whatsoever. He would pick me up from the airport himself. And when he came to visit me from New York, well, he took Amtrak and I'd pick him up at the station. He was a regular guy. And he was an absolute pleasure in every way, shape, or form. It was lovely to have a place to stay when I did go to LA in the guest bedroom, and he was just wonderful. He was learned, he was kind, he was funny as can be. We spent most of our time laughing. He was kind to all his fans. And it was a great blessing for me in my life that our paths crossed. And I'm very thankful that I wrote Too Young for Yiddish. If you buy that book on my site, it comes with a CD of Leonard reading the story. And I used to think that when I was on book tours and I would read the story, I used to think I was pretty good. You know, I thought I was a pretty good reader. Then I heard Leonard read the book, and let me tell you, I wanted to carry a little recording with me every time I went, because I realized the difference between what I did and what he did. It was really, he turned it into an art form.
Thank you so much for sharing story of Leonard's life, your relationship with Leonard Nimoy, your book, information about your gallery. I hope everybody who goes to Northampton or will go to Northampton just to come and check out, meet you, check out your gallery, go to the Yiddish Book Center. There's a lot to see there. I've never really checked it out, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to go.
Let me know you're coming. If you're on this and I can't see you, because again, I'm afraid to scroll because I'll hit the wrong button and you'll all be gone in a moment. Tell me you've been here, say hi, and come visit us.
So someone said it's William Shatner's birthday today. So who knew we would choose the day? I haven't confirmed that, but I do trust my people here.
Offhand, I know Leonard's birthday offhand. I can't tell you. I know.
And the fact that Leonard Nimoy came from Ukraine is, again, who knew that we would be in the mess in the world we're in? But we'd have someone from the Ukraine who came to his family came to the United States and who had made such an impact on our pop culture.
I'll say also that for those who don't know that the president of Ukraine, President Zelensky, that I also in my gallery represent Paddington, if you know the books or things, and you might know that the president of Ukraine was the voice of Paddington in both movies. So another connection here.
Did not know that. Well, at CSP, we do a variety of programs and you learn a lot. Today's program was certainly interesting. Thank you for sharing your story, your relationship. And I want to wish you all a safe day. I will tell you, I know more and more people who are getting sick with COVID. They're doing okay, but I would be careful out there, everybody. In my office alone, there people are not here today. So take care, be safe. Rich, nice to meet you. Jeff Kaufman. Thank you for the intro. See, we get people ask, how do we get great programs? And I say, from you. I have my list, but you guys send me ideas. I know Jennifer Malvin has sent me ideas as well that I'll be following up on. But this program would not have happened without Jeff Kaufman stepping into your gallery. And so everybody share ideas, share programs, and we'll have more programs to enjoy all of us together. Thank you so much, Rich, and looking forward to having you back. We'll do some more programs with you. Looking forward to hearing about your poetry.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye. Thanks, everybody. Take care. See you tomorrow.